my gosh, we are live. How epic was that countdown, though?
I was definitely rocking out for a bit.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Sex Magic Podcast. This is our first ever live podcast episode recording, and all of us are extremely excited about it. So thank you for joining us for this pioneer episode.
Yes. We are so excited. Like, my excitement level is off the charts. I think it's gone too high.
No such thing.
So I guess we should just do like a little introduction in case there's any new faces tuning in. My name is Tosca, and I'm one of the hosts of the Sex Magic Podcast.
My name is Isabella Freppier, also a host of the Sex Magic Podcast.
And I'm Shady, also a host of the podcast.
So today we are having a really beautiful episode about the cyclical natures of sexuality and spirituality. And this is something I feel like we've touched upon in a lot of different episodes, but we've never really given the concept a full like hours worth conversation. So I'm really excited to dive in. And also, this is a chapter in our upcoming course, the Sex Magic Fundamentals.
It's probably my favorite chapter, though it's hard to pick. It's like picking children.
I know. Every time we made videos for the course, and each time I made the videos for each section, I was like, I think this might be like the most exciting module for the course, but maybe everyone is so excited.
But I feel like when we can really connect with and understand our cyclical nature and how we relate with the universe in their cyclical natures, we can really maximize our life and our potential. So as with all the modules, it's one I'm really excited about.
Yes. Yeah, and so much stuff about the moon too, which I feel like definitely goes along with that, just because the moon is always changing, always going through different phases. And I feel like when we're able to understand the spiritual significance of each, we can honor like a different part of ourselves and just transitions in general. So
absolutely.
Definitely. I think what's so interesting about like the concept of cyclical being is that it's something that's present in so many different spiritual practices and religions and cultures. And I feel like everyone is able to immediately connect to it because just the symbolism of a circle is just like universal. When we see the circle, we understand maybe intuitively that it's a regenerative cycle, that there is no necessarily beginning or end, that it's a constant flow of beginning and endings. And that's what I love about the cyclical nature concept.
Yeah, I love that too. And for me, like I have, as a person, have really struggled with accepting and embracing change in my life. But when I reoriented that idea as just being cyclical instead of this is viewed as change, that was just a really important reframe for me. And instead I was like, ooh, what fresh season of my life is this? Instead of, oh gosh, like what's changing and how can I adjust to that?
Yeah. Definitely. I actually had this thought recently just because with all these experiences happening in my personal life this past year and currently in this one experience that I'm in right now, I actually did a meditation a few days ago and kind of sought some guidance from, my spirit guides, whoever, the divine. And I got a message. Can you find pleasure in each part of the cycle, even in the loss and the endings? And I think there's something actually quite erotic and ecstatic about sadness and sorrow, even in moments of, tragedy or loss. Like there is something where you just feel so alive. And I think that any moment or experience or emotion that brings us back into our aliveness is really spiritual and really beautiful and teaches us something. So I was just, ruminating upon how I could find pleasure in loss and in endings.
That's such a beautiful concept. And have either of you read Pussy, a Reclamation by Mama Gina?
I have not.
It's such a good book. I think it was one of the ones I put on that reading list that we made a while ago. But she has a beautiful concept in there called swamping that I really love, particularly for marking and ritualizing grief. And, I won't do it justice. You should get the book. But the idea is that we allow ourselves to fully embody our grief and let it express in any way it needs to express. So one of the examples she gives is putting on a rubbish bag. What do you call this in American? A rubbish bag? It's a different word, right?
Rubbish
garbage bag?
Yeah, the garbage thing. Yeah. Or trash, right? Trash.
Bag.
Like putting one of them on and like punching pillows and slamming tea towels against the wall and just really like ritualizing and expressing your grief in the transition. And I don't really like plastic.
I like that.
That's a practice I really like doing, being able to like fully just embody it instead of so often I feel like we're socially conditioned to try to move through any emotion that doesn't feel like joyful and easeful.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we can do ourselves a real injustice by just bypassing them like that.
Right, bypassing or suppressing them. And I went to a rage room, I think earlier in the year. I don't know if they're open now, but it's where you can basically just go to this room and like beat tires and break a bunch of stuff. And it was really liberating. And I was super tired afterwards. I was like, man, ow, my arms.
I want that in my life so bad. One of my friends and I planned to go and do it right before COVID hit.
Oh no, that's like when you need it the most.
Maybe it is open because it's pretty, I feel like it's socially distanced because you usually just have like a room to yourself and you have to wear like a full jumpsuit and like gloves and like a helmet. So maybe it's still going on.
BYO helmets.
Yeah.
But yeah, doing anything that feels like resonant to you, like for some people that type of like transmuting emotion through, violence or rage might not feel accessible. I really struggle to identify with anger as an emotion. So another practice I really like is using dance and embodiment and breath work. Like it doesn't have to be smashing teacups and cups.
Yeah, I really love that. I feel like for me, I love to turn to like artistic expression to work through specific experiences. And what I've been working with recently is vocal toning. And so just releasing sound to let any like emotion come through. So yeah, do you guys see our comments?
Yeah, I just did and got super distracted.
Oh wait, I haven't been looking. Oh, I see.
It's really funny. What was comments for? Rage room. Mr. Clean himself.
Mr. Clean is trolling us, you guys.
Well, it's the price we pay for being online. I'm fine with it.
That's totally true. So I guess before we like go real deep into the concept of our cyclical nature, I would love to just check in with you both and we can catch up our listeners on what's been going on in our lives, what we've been working on. Also, I just miss you both so much. All right, who's going first?
I feel like we always get funny whenever it's like an online space. It's hard to tell. What are my life updates? I was in a car accident, so that was unpleasant. I am taking and teaching the Pleasure Devotional, which is my flagship course. But it's been really transformational and interesting and actually very on brand for today in our cyclical nature because I had made my car mean a lot of things to me that it didn't really. Like it just was my car at the end of the day. And it was really hard for me to cope with the fact that this person who wasn't paying attention ended my car's cycle with me and turned it into a cycle of scrap parts, I would imagine. So that was really hard for me. And then dealing with the physical discomfort. It's been 2 weeks today and I'm still in a lot of pain. So I've been using a lot of cannabis internally and externally, which has been so helpful. But it was really a beautiful blessing from the universe once I really leaned into the message of just being able to sit with what's going on with me and not always be on the move physically and emotionally. And doing the Pleasure Devotional at the same time, it really made me realize how perfectionistic my idea had been of how my journey would look in that and how it's okay for some days for me to my self-care and my pleasure journey is just like going to be laying in bed using cannabis to help with my pain, and for that to be okay. And it doesn't always need to look, Instagram worthy for it to be valid.
Yeah. Sending you so much love and healing. I'm so sorry about the car accident. It just really is unfair when it's circumstances you can't control. And I think that's a lesson for sure in the cyclical nature, is that while we think we have power over our path, oftentimes, maybe all the time, we have to surrender and let the flow just kind of guide us, and trust that what is meant to be will be. And I'm so glad that you're finding some positive in the experience as well.
Thank you, love. Yeah, it was definitely a big exercise in releasing control. And one of the most valuable tools I've used in my life is looking for what is the lesson in what is happening, instead of just leaning into like the woe is me aspect, which I could easily get into with this situation, but I won't. And so that's been a really helpful tool in my life. And, it is a very cyclical moment for me to be acknowledging and presencing, as I have a lot of big things coming up for me that are real big transitions. I think probably the main one I have coming up, not in the imminent future, in the next month or so, but within the next year, is transitioning from maiden to mother in my journey. That's my big cyclical updates, I would say, in my life. Car crash, upcoming big change into the different next stage of my life, and healing a lot of control and perfection issues.
Those are big. I'm trying to think of the cycle stuff that's been going on in my life this year. I've been really busy with work, and as always, I'm just trying to figure out how to constantly balance work and my own pleasure. So I guess in terms of cycles, I've been working on getting the quarterly box up for Moonbox, which is this lunar-based subscription box that I co-founded. And we had been doing monthly deliveries, and we just made the decision to switch to quarterly and honoring, the changing seasons. And it's all based on sustainability too, like less orders every month is, better for the environment, but also, we were thinking of sustainability in terms of not just where like stuff is coming from and like what the ingredients are, but developing sustainable relationships with our vendors and making sure that we're spreading abundance in all areas. Because, owning a subscription box that's also spiritual, you have that balance between, wanting to give the most value, but also it sucks having to talk down vendors and be like, no, can you do this for less? So we want to be able to pay people more. And that's kind of why we've moved towards the quarterly and making it a little bit more expensive. But that's kind of, I guess, a rebirth and transformation that this year gave. So, yeah.
So beautiful and so inspiring to see amazing people like yourself having these really ethical and important sustainable business models.
Yeah, it feels much more aligned, because I feel like whenever we've tried to go towards, okay, like how can we get more people to subscribe or get more money and stuff, it just has never felt right. So in this new, what Moonbox has been promoting the entire time. So yeah, getting ready for the fall box.
Shady, you always inspire me so much as a leader and as a businesswoman. I honestly have learned so much from you, just like witnessing you and like working with you.
Yeah, having to constantly evolve is a big part. I feel like if you're not willing to grow and, figure things out on the fly, you're just not going to be able to survive. So if stuff isn't working out, I feel like what you're kind of saying, Bella, finding the positives in it, reframing kind of your perspective on everything and just being like, all right, I got this,
Yeah. Amazing. I feel like I definitely updated the podcast early on in the season about all the massive change that I was experiencing. And it's been really interesting kind of listening back to the episodes and seeing where I was in this development process. But I feel like I just went through this final portal, the end of a transition, the end of a major chapter of my life. I finally moved out of the house that I was in and the house that I had shared with my ex. And it was very interesting. I was able to spend 2 months in the house without him present in the house anymore. So I had a very different energy. And this summer has just been incredibly transformative and just like realizing what I experienced the past few years. And I feel like I became a woman in that house. And I just have so much respect and love for that change that I went through. And, you know, just transformation in general it's beautiful and it can be painful. There's so many growing pains. And, you know, by the end of that relationship, there was a lot of pain and sadness. But once I worked through it and found the beauty and love in it, I feel like I was able to reflect on the past few years and just be like, wow, like I've grown so much and I'm so proud of myself and proud of where I am. And the summer really has been about rediscovering myself and redefining what I want and allowing myself to receive the love that I deserve. I've had a wonderful, fun summer of love. And I'm very grateful that I was able to experience someone who wanted to show me just like how I deserve to be treated. And I think that that was a really great gift to be able to receive that and to hold space for someone else in their sexual journey as well. So it's been fun.
Well, I don't want Leo season to end. I'm just like, I love all these like joyful, like find your joy, like, you know, spend time doing what you love. I just love that so much.
No, it's been so fiery, like just like a flash of like fire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I've definitely been seeing a lot of my one-on-one clients and just kind of in my community in general, whether it's with friends or people on Instagram, that a lot of people, particularly during Leo season, have had really amplified transitions that are coming up for them.
It was so interesting.
The intensity.
When I was moving, as I was literally putting furniture on the truck, I got this email that was like a major career opportunity that happened. And it was just like, as soon as I closed one door, all these other doors started to open. It's just like, wow, the power of letting go. You really have to say goodbye, let go, release control, surrender to the flow. And then all of a sudden, the universe is like, oh, there's space now. Here, let me show you what's been waiting for you. And it's so cool.
That's so true. And I feel like what we, in my opinion at least, what we say no to in the universe and where we draw those boundaries is when we're going to get really amplified stuff coming towards us. Like if you'll say no to that, okay, I'm going to send you something next level.
Mm-hmm.
Also, yeah, when I've definitively said no to things, been like, no way. I feel like, yeah, just other doors have majorly opened up. But I've had to make those like very conscious decisions to, okay, this isn't what I want. I'm going to definitively cut it off. And then, yeah, just kind of ascend to the next level. And also, too, with the Lionsgate portal that we talked about on the last full moon circle that we did, I feel like that's also like kind of an accelerated gateway of ascension and manifestation. And then with the new moon in Leo coming up too, I feel like that's even more of a fiery new beginning. So
I'm super excited for it. I feel like we have this year's been a lot, but it's been so transformational.
So transformational.
Also, for everyone commenting, we're seeing your comments. I'm saving them to our document and we're going to answer any and all questions that we can. So feel free to keep dropping them in the comments and we're going to keep saving them and we'll get to them a bit later.
Yes.
So as we're talking, if you think of a question, just drop it in there and we will get to it.
So let's talk about all the different manifestations of cycles that we go through. I know we touched upon a little bit before we started the call, but I feel like we've got to start with the moon.
The most cyclical of all beings.
Yeah, like in astrology, the moon kind of dictates our subconscious and our intuition and emotions. So the moon changes signs about every 2.5 days. So that's why, you know, they say that our emotions are kind of tied to the moon and like the pulling of the tides and everything. And yeah. And with all the phases too, they also kind of have a different meaning. associated with them. So obviously I feel like people know new moon and full moon a lot. New moon being like, you know, a time where you can wipe the slate clean and kind of have a new beginning and a fresh start. And then a full moon is kind of like the culmination of energy. So during that time, as the moon is full, a lot can be illuminated. We can have a lot of breakthroughs and realizations about certain things, what we need to let go of. And then it's also a time of like abundance and harvest too. So kind of taking stock of all the changes that we've gone through throughout the cycle.
I feel like all the baby witches listening need to just notice like how easy it is to connect with the cycles of the moon. I feel like that is probably one of the best ways to begin a witchcraft or a spiritual practice, is just attuning to the cycles of the moon. And I think that working with the cycles of nature in general, and specifically with the moon cycles, is a beautiful way for us to connect with that regenerative cycle that is just innately part of our being as well. It's, you know, something that I like to focus on in this kind of like an environmental way of being, is realizing that we are not separate from the earth and that we are actually part of the earth. And once we have that relationship and that intimacy with Mother Nature, then we feel more connected and we feel more grounded and supported. So, you know, having patience with ourselves as we go through these transitive cycles. Yes, there are times where we are in our full luminosity, in our full moon phases. And yes, we're also going to have in which we are connected to the new moon, where, you know, we have to go inward and we have to reflect and be quiet and sit in the stillness. So yeah, definitely, Shady, what you were saying, like there are so many different parts of the moon cycles that we can work with, not just the new and full moon. And there's different spells and rituals and meditations you can do to connect to each one of them, and also sex magic practices for each one.
Yeah, I definitely would encourage anyone that's listening and feeling curious and wanting to dive deeper to take our upcoming course, Sex Magic Fundamentals, where you can learn a lot more. But one of the great like entry ways to start is getting a dedicated journal, whether that's like a Google Doc or an actual, you know, physical journal. That's what I like working with. And just being like a sexy, curious, witchy scientist, where you write down, you know, what's the day, where is the moon, what planet is it in, what phase is it in, and how are you feeling? And particularly if you're a person with internal reproductive anatomy, it can be a beautiful element to add to your journaling of where you are in your menstrual cycle and how you're feeling, and starting to notice how the moon is maybe affecting you and how you are or aren't cycling with it.
Yeah, it's just a really easy way to kind of, it's just, I was just saying it is a very easy way to check in, because before I started getting into the moon, like I don't want to say I wasn't intentional about anything, but I felt like once I started learning about all the things associated with the different phases, I could look to the day and be like, okay, it's, you know, the first quarter moon, that's a time of like action where you start encountering like the first obstacles or challenges to, you know, whatever you're trying to manifest, and you have to make decisions. And I feel like understanding that that's kind of like the energy that's going on, I'm like, okay, well, what decisions do I have to make? You know, what challenges are coming up that I have to kind of navigate through? So I feel like when people are like, I don't really know how to connect to it, it's just look up what the phase generally means and what's going on in your life, and you can start to kind of, you know, see how things are aligning and the patterns that are forming. So
yeah, that's so true. And it's one of the, I think it's Alyssa Vitti that at least popularized, I don't know if she came up with the concept, but of cycle syncing. There's a great book, Woman Code, if you're curious about that. So you can plan your life based on where you are in your menstrual cycle. So for example, just a quick tangible example for folks listening, if you're ovulating, you're probably going to feel a bit more outgoing and friendly and creative. So that's a great time to schedule social things. However, at a time when perhaps you're in your bleed phase, you might be feeling a lot more introverted and intuitive. So that would be a great time to schedule like journaling and reflective prompts. So that's one aspect that you can use cycles, your interior cycles, to work with your life. And as Katie's saying, you can also then add in what's the moon doing. So maybe you're in a phase where you're feeling really interior So then you can time that to when the moon's feeling that too, to like double down and amplify all that juiciness.
Yes, totally. I love that book, Woman Code. It was gifted to me a few years ago, and honestly, just like so transformative in understanding myself and my body. And if you're someone who bleeds every month, it's just really beautiful to connect with your own patterns, because every person is different, of course. But something that I've been really trying to focus on with my cycle is actually something that ties to my cultural heritage with Judaism. When women or people who bled in the past in Jewish culture, you would go to the mikveh, and the mikveh is like a sacred bathhouse, and you just took the entire time for your cycle to be away from your husband, be away from your kids, just focus on what you need to release. And that's something that I've been trying to do, obviously not going to a mikveh, though I really miss the Korean spa, but allowing myself to just rest, just giving myself the gift of taking a day off, the first day of the bleed, just allowing that. And honoring these cycles is going to perhaps shift how you live day to day. But I feel like if you lean into the cycles, then it's going to be more supportive in the long run. Because if we keep trying to like go and run around and be productive all the time and live in that, more solar, masculine, summer, south, fire element phase, it's just going to burn you out, rather than attuning to the cycles and having a regenerative cycle and having more energy in the long run.
Absolutely. And for people who have exterior reproductive anatomy, people that are testosterone driven folks, your hormone cycle is a little bit different, and it functions on a closer to a 24-hour cycle. So for people that are estrogen driven folks, these aren't the most perfect words. I'm just trying to use things that are most accurate in this example. We don't have the right comprehensive language yet, but for people that are more estrogen driven, our cycles tend to be anywhere between, on average, like 21 to 40 days. So that's how your energy is going to be fluctuating within that massive cycle. And then for people with testosterone, it's closer to 24 hours. So in terms of the cyclical nature of
I'm like 24 hours.
A lot of people that are testosterone driven will find that there's a certain type of day that they're more consistently have arousal and or desire. Those two things are slightly different, but I'm just going to conflate them for this example. So that would be one way to start noticing and seeing, okay, how can I work with my own cyclical nature on that 24-hour cycle to be more successful? And then particularly for people that are testosterone driven, I would recommend, like Katie mentioned earlier, really working with something like the moon that does have that longer cyclical nature, so that you can sync up with those cycles, because you don't have them in the exact same way that people estrogen driven do. But I want to just make a little space for those folks too.
Good to know.
What's so interesting is just how many facets of cyclical natures we can find within the realm of sexuality, because what we're talking about right now is more our sexual health and our reproductive system.
Right.
And we've touched a little upon just more of the witchcraft, the spiritual element of the cycles, but there's also sexual identity, there's also intimacy, there's just so many different ways we can embody this cyclical nature. And I think it's just so much fun to be able to explore this with awareness.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I just want to presence before we close that sort of container, that for trans, intersex, and non-binary folks, my answer kind of falls more into what I was mentioning about the testosterone driven, that your hormone cycle is going to be really varied. So for those folks, again, syncing up with the moon is a great idea. What would you say you two have noticed the most as the cyclical aspect of your sexuality? Like for me, I feel like it's been most obvious in terms of my sexual and gender expression, and then my relationship to kink. But I'm wondering, does that relate with you both, or is it really different?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, all the things.
I feel as though I go through, I would say probably 4-year cycles, 2 to 4 year cycles, and I rediscover parts of myself constantly. But I can kind of look back on the past 7 or 8 years and really see these clear periods of time in which I was trying on something new, and I was exploring a different part of my sexual identity, exploring a different part of how I wanted to be intimate with people. And it's interesting because they keep coming back into each other, and again, going back to the concept of the circle, it's this rise and fall. And for me, I think discovering kink and BDSM was just, incredible in helping me begin the exploration of my sex identity and reclaiming my sexuality after, having sexual trauma in my, teen years. And I feel as though the past couple of years, I've started to feel that tingle of change again, where something wasn't working. And now in the past couple of months, this is like so major. I released the identity of submissive. Gasp,
Wow.
gasp, gasp. And I used to say that was my sexual orientation. Like I thought fully that was just who I was, and I always would be submissive, and I almost was angry if I had any thought that wasn't that way. But, the past couple of years, I've started to feel just not as connected to that expression of identity. And I explore this summer and leaning into that dominant side. And oh my gosh, it's crazy. I texted Shady for some advice at the beginning of this journey. She gave me some top-notch advice.
Top advice?
Oh, yeah. But I feel like I really love connecting with Carl Jung's concept of the archetypes. And my last solo episode for this podcast was on the erotic archetypes. And I feel that's a wonderful way to explore your sexual identity, at least for me, and connecting with how I express myself and also connecting with the shadow self. So the shadow self is the part of your identity that is more the subconscious, more mysterious, more hidden. So, understanding that I always will have duality. And again, I'm a Gemini. I literally go by 2 different names. I am very into this idea. So Tosca versus Leah, they're 2 different sexual identities and 2 different expressions. But I think that, allowing myself to have duality and allowing myself to be in a constant flow, constant evolution, and giving myself permission to explore has been huge.
What do you think has helped you the most in being able to release those self-narratives? Because that's something I really struggle with. I can get really attached to my own identifiers. Like I just was thinking of like, oh my gosh, when you said that you don't identify in that way any longer, I was like, oh wow, that's so challenging for me to imagine for myself. But my own relationship to my sexual orientation and my gender expression has changed a lot. And that's something I've been really shockingly easy breezy about. But I feel like my relationship to my sexual preferences is a little bit more black and white in my mind. So I was just wondering, what do you think helped you relax and just let those cycles end and compost and nourish beautiful new seeds and sprouts?
It's hard. It's really hard because I just feel like you hold on to identity. You hold on to, it's almost the ego, like this is who I am. I want to know who I am. And it's so terrifying to kind of surrender into the unknown of like, wow, I am constantly changing. And I just have to accept that I don't know who I am. But for me, I feel like the tools that really help me the most would be writing. I don't know if I've shared this often with the podcast, but I'm a writer and I write lit erotica. I write erotic poetry.
The best.
No, thank you. My private like little Tosca Instagram is all focused on exploring my sexual journey. And I find that allowing my mind to release into this creative space and use language to kind of sort through the chaos of thought just helps me understand myself deeper. And also just, meditating is so simple, but meditating is just, it's one of the most powerful things we can do because it's just being present with yourself, your breath, and the moment.
I love that.
So I'm curious, Bella, you mentioned that you've been able to be more fluid with your gender expression and your, I'm sorry, could you say what else?
Like my sexual orientation and my gender expression and how they like interrelate, I would say.
I'm so curious. Tell me more.
Let me think. How can I tell you without taking up a whole episode? Let's see. So I feel like when I was a young person, like very young, like 4, 5, 6, it's not that I realized I was gay, but I realized that other people were straight. And it was the exact same thing for my witchcraft. I was like, oh, you guys don't hear your ancestors talking to you? Because I can hear yours, So it was more learning that my expression of life and my engagement with life was different than others, not like, oh, this is what I want to be, if that makes sense. From like the time of like 5 or 6, I knew lots of different things were awry with me that didn't seem to be with my peers. And I think I kind of still went along with like, I'll present as straight, but I know differently until I was about 13 or 14, though I did have in like kindergarten and primary school, I did have boyfriends and girlfriends. But I think my parents are just like, oh, whatever. That's cute. Doesn't mean anything. And then I came out as bi first, I think, and then gay. And my parents were like, that's cool. That's just a phase. I was like, okay. And then I felt pretty like staunchly gay for my like late teens, sort of early 20s. And then around that time that I was really leaning into my lesbianness at the time, I was also rewatching The L Word.
Oh my God, yes. Love that show.
And total self-drag was like, okay, how can I be the most like Shane? Because that was the character who I like related to the most, in that they identify as a woman, they're not very feminine presenting, and they don't relate to other like women in a feminine way, which is probably funny for you two to hear because you only know me as very femme, but I used to be quite masculine. And I had a lot of internalized patriarchy in the way I was relating to women I was dating, where I was kind of not the best dude, And so then I did a lot of unpacking of that. And so that was right around the time that I was really questioning my gender. And I remember I had my first existential gender crisis when I was about like 11. And my best friend my whole life has been a boy, still is. And I was like crying in his bathroom, being like, I'll never know what it feels like to be a boy. And I was crying. I think I remembered a past life or something where I had a masculine identifying body, and it's very complicated.
Wow.
Then I went through that again in my early 20s. And I ultimately at the time decided that I didn't want to transition in any type of way to being a masculine presenting person. I will be honest, I feel like a big part of that was just there's not a lot of access to that, and like there's not even like good surgeries for that even still. So I just thought, if I can't have this entire version of it, I don't want any of it. Like I want to have the experience of being born traditionally male and being raised traditionally male. So I'll just have to do that next time I incarnate on this planet. But then I also was realizing a lot that I was conflating patriarchy with how I could present as a gay person. So then I re-examined, do I actually have to have like a really masculine persona to express my queerness? And that's something that I've been exploring and unpacking the past 5 to 7 years, I would say, and starting to date women that are femme and I'm femme in the same expression, which has been really interesting. And at this point, I feel super fluid and neutral about my gender. I predominantly, like, I obviously present and pass as female. I'm a cisgender person in that I was assigned female at birth and my genitals reflect that. But I don't really feel super attached to it. And I'm very, very neutral about pronouns. Like, I don't really have a preferred pronoun. Like, people predominantly refer to me as like she or they, but I don't mind at all. And when I was a young person, like late teens, I would often get mispronounced as masculine, and I loved it. It was like so affirming to me. I would never correct people. I'd be like, "You're welcome," you know. Because I was also a really sweet boy, you know. I'd be like opening doors for older ladies and stuff. But it's interesting because I've had such neutrality about my sexual orientation and my gender expression being so fluid. I've never felt challenged or confronted by it in any way. And I'm really privileged. I'm a white person and I have a pretty open-minded family, so I haven't had any real type of pushback. But in terms of my sexual relationship to my own sexual preferences, I feel like I'm much more binary and firm, which is just kind of, I'm just realizing in this conversation, to be honest.
Scorpio rising.
Yeah.
A little evolution coming.
Yeah, I'm down for it, you know. I'm down to take the ride and to let it change and be. And I think a big part of my work is I've been doing a lot of in the pleasure devotional, in the journal prompts, of understanding how I relate to my sexuality in relationship to others. So a lot of this change and exploration has been based on like who I'm dating and what their expression is. So that's not ideal. And I'm excited to prioritize more of that reflection and exploration in relationship to myself and not just mirroring a partner.
I relate to that so deeply. Actually, like, it reminded me of this like download I got just as I was really ready to release the identity of submissive, and that was, my sexuality is defined by what I let other people do to me. And just hearing that in my own mind was really intense. And I think that is a common experience for a lot of people. And I mean, I love our podcast, so I'm just going to call back to the episode that you did on sexual sovereignty. And I think that's a great listen if any of our listeners also kind of feel as though they maybe have that shared experience and could use some guidance in that.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that episode. And the sexual sovereignty and body literacy is such core parts of who I am as a person and what I teach and practice in my work. So I definitely would recommend checking out those episodes. And we do really build on boundaries, sovereignty, protection, consent, communication in our upcoming course. So if you want more structure and support, that's a really great resource for that.
Yeah, and what I love about our course is that it's interactive, and so we have little homework assignments, so you'll be able to learn a lot of these concepts and then put them into action through these journal prompts and ideas, and it's wonderful. I'm a big fan.
And the cyclical like module in the course is really amazing, and one of the things that I think will be really interesting for people, because it certainly is for me, is learning the different ways I relate to and show up to my sexuality and how different that is based on, like we were mentioning earlier, either my interior landscape and cycles of my hormones or also the moon, and learning, and the other planets too. Like just the other day, I was like, what is going on with me romantically? And I looked up where Mars and Venus were, and I was like, okay, yeah, checks out. Aries. Mars was in Aries and Venus was Cancer or Pisces or something. And I was like, oh, this is just not a good combo for me. But yeah, being able to really explore, release, expand, and unpack, I would say, your relationship to being a cyclical person and how that interrelates to your sexuality is like such a key piece for me in my life, like personally and professionally.
And I feel like once you kind of embody your cyclical nature, then life just gets a little bit easier. Like as we go through these cycles, just understanding, okay, this is part of this element of cycle, and that's okay. Like I can release this. And I know that there will be a period of time in which I come back into my luminosity, or I come back into a new beginning.
Yeah.
I feel like once you recognize all the different, that it's just a natural part of life, you're able to release a lot of that resistance and just surrender.
Yeah, like the world is cyclical and so are you, baby. Like get with the program, figure it out. Because I feel like for me, before I embraced like being a cyclical being, it felt like I was constantly treading water. Like if I was in a river, I was always treading water or trying to sink my little feet into the mud to try to be like, no, I need to figure out where I am and what's going on, right? It's a lot of work and effort to try to keep yourself there. But when you embrace yourself as cyclical, you can kind of just float on the surface and see where the river is guiding you and where you want to go. And it's so much more easeful, even though it's fucking terrifying and it's hard to like just lean into the chaos. But one of my mentors once said to me, if you don't trust the universe, who do you trust? And I think about that all the time. The universe is working with you for best results, and you need to work with it too. Think you are that you know better than the universe.
And another part of the cyclical, nature that is available to us in our environment is of life. And this is a concept that is in a few different cultures and spiritual practices, but it ties into the different elements and the 4 directions. So we have north, south, east, and west, which correlates with earth, air, fire, and water. And one of the things in our course is this wonderful diagram of the wheel of life, and you'll be able to see which element, which direction represents the maiden part of our life, or the mother, or the queen, or the crone, and the different qualities of each element of the cycle. So you'll be able to really like dive in, explore these concepts, and then I feel like you'll be able to see them in your own life a lot easier once you learn the language. So I feel like we should take some questions. I know we've got probably like 12, 13 more minutes left of our fun little live episode.
Yeah, I'm excited. Let's see, we had a couple submitted earlier. And if you have some questions, feel free to drop them in the comments now. We can see them most easily if you drop them into the StreamYard, but I think we could probably still see them if they're in the Facebook group.
You guys, my mom commented.
Is she Story Lady's magic book?
Yes.
Checks out.
Yes.
I'm not going to count what do you need helmets for as a question. Let's see. Here we go. Wei is wondering, they're curious, what is the difference between breathwork and meditation? So for me, the difference is that they could both be involved in the same thing in session. Breathwork can be a meditation. Meditation can include breathwork, and this is just my definition. But for me, the distinction would be where the focus is. Is the focus on the session of the breath and working with the breath, or is it on like mindfulness and body work? And for me, most meditations I do or guided practices that I teach and lead use a combination of all 3. I like to work with visualization, breathwork, and embodiment practices simultaneously. That's my definition. What about you two, babes?
That's a pretty thorough definition. Oh, are we frozen? So yeah, I feel as though the intention behind it is the difference, because breath work can just be focused on that one activity, but meditation can include breath work. For me, meditation is a little bit more cerebral and less focused on any specific action, while I feel like breath work can be very active. I've done some breath work that's like we get moving and flowing and breathe in and and I feel like meditation practices are more just like focus on your breath and go off somewhere else.
Yeah, I feel like I've used breath work a lot kind of for anxiety, you know, if I'm going down like that wormhole, it's like, okay, just like focus on the breath, kind of try to filter everything else out. And that also does kind of lead into meditation, like you guys mentioned. But
Actually, we have both breathwork and meditation practices in our course. I love using breathwork in erotic spaces. I think that it's a really wonderful tool for us to connect to our sensuality and our sexuality.
Couldn't agree with you more. Okay, let's see. Next question is using my significant other's account. Oh, are there any written references of cyclical magic for feminine archetypes? That's super specific.
Oh, can you say that again?
Yeah. Are there any written references of cyclical magic for feminine archetypes? For me, I think of Run with Wolves.
Yes, all of the work by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. So if you go on Audible, this is like secret pro tip. Clarissa Pinkola Estes has probably a dozen different lectures that are not available as books, and they're all on Audible. So she has this one that I just adore called Theater of the Imagination. And it explores a lot of different fairy tales and folk tales and myths and how they relate to our archetypes. And oftentimes she will reference the cycles of our lives and the cycles of nature in all of these. There's another great one, How to Embody Your Creative Fire. There's just so many. But I feel like her work is just so thorough and so incredible. She's a, psychologist. She's a curandera. She's just a true goddess. And I'm so grateful that we have her work available to us because she's sharing so much knowledge that is, pretty tricky to find. So yeah, Clarissa Pinkola.
We have an Audible discount, I think, for folks.
Oh, right? We do. I will add that to our show notes when we put this on the all of the streaming platforms.
Perfect. Okay, let's see. Who else have we got? Kiara. Oh my God. This is for me. Are you going to become a mother? That's beautiful. Yes, I am. Thank you so much for asking. Not into physical form yet, but I am preparing myself emotionally, physically, spiritually, mentally to go through that massive cyclical change. Let's see. How can we get more info about the course? Yeah. So we're going to give a special discount code for anyone that's here on the live today. Do you want me to just say that out loud, Tosca, or are we going to put that in the notes? Yeah.
We can say it out loud, and I'll add it in the comments, and I'll add it in the show description once we have it.
Awesome. This code is like the biggest code you can get if you are not a Patreon. That's where you can get the big bonus one. So you can also just sign up to become a Patreon. Or whatever it is, and you can get a discount there. But for our lovely listeners and watchers on our live, you can use the code LIVEMAGIC for $15 off, and we're going to be sending out emails with all of that juicy info of how to sign up.
Yeah, and the course is coming out on Tuesday, right? On the 18th?
Yes, on the 18th. Yeah, so the code is LIVEMAGIC. I'm going to add it.
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. I think we missed a couple. Here's your resource. Never look into her. Go through Crochet to become a sexual empowerment coach. Awesome. Any suggestions where to begin? As someone that does that work, I'm a pleasure mentor. I would recommend focusing the most on your sexual journey with yourself, and you can start reaching out to people, get some mentorship, and let the business unfold and listen the most to where you're being called to be of service, and balance and experiment that weighed up with what feels good to you. Where are you resourced? Where are you being energetically filled? Where are you being energetically drained? And I would be putting the most focus on exploring that sexual relationship with yourself, because I think that's where we can become really awesome, powerful healers when we're doing that work ourselves and we can relate to people. Oh, this one might be a good one for you, Tosca. Do you have any tips on how to move through the changes with a long-term primary?
What I would be curious to ask further, what kind of changes? I feel as though the answer always is communication. How can you communicate best with your primary partner? In my previous relationship, we used to do a weekly check-in. So at the beginning of the week, we would talk about positives from the previous week, anything that was present for us, anything that we wanted to work on. So we had this really beautiful way to connect to each other consistently. And I think having consistent open communication is really powerful. And sometimes challenging conversations will come up. I remember one of my challenging experiences was when my ex didn't want to do 24/7 DS anymore, which is being in a 24/7 dom submissive relationship. And when I heard him express this need, at first I was just like, oh my God, like, yeah, like again, holding on to the identity of submissive so hard. But at the end of the day, after learning that that was best for both of us, I was able to really explore who I was as a partner rather than just as a submissive in a relationship. And so just allowing yourself some patience as you go through transitions. But I think that there are really fun ways that you can communicate and fun ways you can explore each other and explore yourself within that partnership. And I think it really comes down to having open communication with them and open communication with yourself. So can you keep a journal about your sexual identity, your expressions? Can you, read books of poetry and read books on different sexual paths or sex magic? Like just constantly learn more about yourself and learn more about your partner and just live in a state of curiosity. I think that would be my advice.
That's such good advice. And I think one of the questions I often give to my one-on-one clients that they say they've never thought of or considered talking about with a partner before is asking your partner what they need to have these types of conversations. So have a conversation. It's like very meta, but have a conversation about how you want to have these conversations. What do you need to feel resourced and emotionally safe and safe in your nervous system, and what boundaries can you draw to have those combos? Also, thank you. Addison says, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. You're so welcome, Addison. Super stoked that you're out here wanting to do this work because we need you. We need you. We need your help. We need your support. And the world needs your unique brand of magic and sexual healing that you have to offer the world.
Well, we have a few minutes left. I think we should talk maybe a little bit more about the course and the future of the pod now that we are officially coming to the close of season 4.
Season 4 was so great. I feel like it was my favorite season. I think I say that every time, but
it just gets better and better, which is awesome. So since the beginning of this podcast, I always knew that I wanted to share sex magic in a really affordable, accessible way. I was in a plant medicine apprenticeship program and we were journeying through the sacral chakra and I brought up sex magic and literally no one had any idea what I was talking about and looked at me like I was just like this kinky crazy person, which I am, but I was just thinking, wow, like I feel as though this is a really important conversation to have and it's a really beautiful thing to explore. And I kind of came to sex magic intuitively, finding that BDSM brought me into a spiritual state of being and got really fascinated by the intersection of sexuality and spirituality. And I just felt so grateful that I had friends that also were really spiritual, sexual, open, brilliant beings. And hello, here we are now. We've had the podcast for 2 years. And
it feels like longer. It's been amazing.
So crazy. And so having a course is just another way that we continue to have these conversations, but we get really intimate and we share more practical, applicable practices and concepts and meditations and rituals. And I feel as though this information just needs to be out there. And I'm so glad that we've worked together to create this course and to share it with you all.
Yeah, me too. And the thing I think one of the main things I'm so excited about with this course is the work that we've done to help it feel applicable in your own life. Like I want you, and if you've listened to my solo episode from this season, you know, I'm all about having that authentic self-expression. So a lot of the journal prompts and coursework in this fundamental course is going to help you figure out what your intuitive sex magic expression is, so that you're not just following along a certain pattern because we said that this is what sex magic is.
Yeah, and it can like very much be your own, because we all have different definitions of sex magic. And me coming into this podcast having really no experience with sex magic whatsoever, I feel like I've learned so much. And I feel like this course, you know, no matter the level of expertise or experience or what you think it is, I feel like anyone can really come to it and be like, oh, okay, this is something that I can make, you know, my own. So yeah, even if you're curious, I would definitely say check it out.
Yeah, I really think it has something for everyone. Doesn't matter what your experience level is, you're definitely going to take, like, if you feel like, oh, I already know a lot of the practices you're teaching in it, maybe you're a really seasoned witch, I still think you get a lot of benefit from it in exploring and examining your relationship and the way you interrelate to sex magic. And of course, having that awesome community peer support there too.
Definitely. And it really is for everyone. Whether you are single or you're partnered, whether you're poly, whether you identify as a witch, whether you, have experience, have no experience, it really is for everyone. And I think that's why we called it fundamentals. It's just like, these are the foundations. And I'm really excited for us to continue sharing more magic and more information through other courses. But like, this is like the beginning. Like, this is step one.
We put the fun in fundamentals and the sexy magic and sex magic.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell them about pricing a little bit, or will they just get that in?
I think we can send that all in the email. I think that'll probably be the easiest way to take that in.
Yeah.
We have a lot of options to make it accessible for everyone.
Yes. Well, my goodness, an hour has gone by already.
So fast.
I want to hang out with you both forever. But I am, again, just so grateful for you both for joining me on this journey with the podcast. And I love the work that we're doing. And I'm so grateful for everyone watching, tuning in, listening, who has followed the journey of the Sex Magic podcast, and really excited to see what our path has in store for us.
Me too. I'm so grateful for the both of you and for all our listeners. We couldn't have done this without each other, and that includes everybody listening and part of our community too.
Yeah. Thank you all so much.
And if you want to follow us on Instagram, we are Instagram.com/sexmagicpodcast or @sexmagicpodcast. We have a website, sexmagicpodcast.com, and we are on all of the podcast streaming apps, iTunes, Spotify, etc. And we are the Sex Magic Podcast, if you didn't get it. All right. Well, love you all. And cheers to season 5, eh?
Thanks for joining us for our first ever live. That was so exciting and fun. We should do it more often.
Yeah. All right. Ending the broadcast.
Bye.